Alright guys, welcome back to Fire Emblem, Faith and Blood. I'm your host Pandan, and we're not going to be playing any Fire Emblem today, but we are going to be talking about Fire Emblem quite a bit. So I wanted to make a video to sum up my thoughts on the first part of this hack and share some of my feedback with Bloopy, and I'm sure other folks here as well who are watching will have some interesting thoughts to share as well. So really curious to hear what the overall feedback is from the group. So definitely, lay out your thoughts in the comments. Do you agree with me? Do you think I'm way off base? I know I want to preface this with everyone has different preferences when they're playing Fire Emblem, and I think one of the things that makes ROM hacking really fun is that you get to design a game in your own image. So like for me, as an old school fan, I definitely lean more towards games that feel like these old school titles versus where more modern Fire Emblem has headed. I think a lot of other ROM hackers feel pretty similarly, and so it's always interesting to see like what skills and mechanics people will use in these games, how they lay out their army, what type of units they clearly preference versus are trying to nerf a little bit. It's really interesting. You can get a sense of what people like to use and what they think is fun to play with, or at least unique. And that's what makes ROM hacking a really fun hobby. So I'm going to share my thoughts on some of the different elements of this game. There's really a lot of good stuff to talk about. I know that I've shared a lot of my feedback already throughout, so some of this might feel a little repetitive, but I want to go through some of the maps, the thoughts on the units, presentation, story, and just some closing thoughts. That's going to be the agenda for this video today. Hopefully I won't take too long, but I first want to start with just a unit-by-unit review. So I'm going to go back into Chapter 1F because I can't see my units post this. We won't really be able to review Sarah more in depth. You can see Sarah the Thief in the previous video. She gets recruited mid-chapter. But we'll go through the units that we do have. They're a little bit lower level than where they ended up, but it should be fine. So I'm going to go unit by unit and just lay out my thoughts for each. So Landon. So I think I got really unlucky with Landon this go around. He did not get great level ups. In spite of that, he was still pretty useful. Lances are a pretty solid weapon type to have in this game. There are a few Lance Reavers sprinkled throughout, which I like. I know I mentioned before the game does not, kind of keel over for Landon. He's not really the easiest unit to use, but he's certainly still useful. Even with bad level ups, he was still able to hold his own. He has nice hit points. He's really well balanced. Yeah, he's just a fine unit to use. I think it's a Lance Lord done right, where he has like a little extra firepower because he has good weapons, and you get his proof weapon or his proficient weapon at the end of this chapter, which is also really nifty, which I think is an interesting design choice to kind of make him feel more ordinary and then give him something a bit more special later on. So I can get on board with that. Fine unit overall. Reposition is really useful. Really useful skill. So I have no complaints with Landon. I think he's pretty well balanced. Last time I played, I got him like 2 or 3 extra levels. He was steamrolling, and he had like 13 strength or something sick like that. So this Landon is way worse. I'm curious, Bloop, how far off I am from the averages. But I'm saying, having played with what I presume is an under-leveled, or rather below average Landon and an above average Landon, that he's pretty viable regardless. So enjoyed using him. Definitely a Lord that I felt like I could put on the front lines, but had to be a little bit careful with, which I think is good balance. And then let's see, Eliash. So Eliash I think turned out pretty decent this go around. He had nice strength, really nice speed and luck. He was not the tankiest ever, but he kind of reminded me a little bit of like using like an Orson or a Havan, like one of those types of axe units who have a bit of speed, not totally power oriented, but can do quite a bit with an axe. I liked using him. I think his skill that gives him extra hit, I think that's what it's certain blow, right? Yeah, he gets extra hit when he's starting the battle, which I think really helps him out a lot on player phase, gives you a little bit more incentive to attack. He leveled up pretty decently. He was useful throughout, even when I had other axe users. I think Ferris was really the only other axe user I had. Eliash definitely had a good niche, and I enjoyed using him, so not really too much to say here. I didn't really use Shove a ton, but it's nice to know that he has it. Fun unit, good concept, kind of speedier axe unit with better player phase hit potential. Like, I'm down with that. So yeah, no real complaints with Eliash. I think he was perfectly solid. One of the better units I had. Bryce. Okay, so Bryce was really, really good. I get that he's kind of like this Oswin Lucas type of character where he's a bit over leveled to start. His growths aren't fantastic, but his bases really carry him, and he grew pretty well, I would say, overall. Like, he only got 1 point of speed in about 7-8 levels, and that's, you know, below probably what he should have done. He probably should have gotten another point of speed by now, but that's fine. His strength and defense were really solid. He didn't even take damage from some of the enemies in the last map with weapon triangle advantage. He was able to tank just about anything I put in front of him. With the Zambato, he was really, really good. He was well suited for dealing with the Cavaliers, which I liked a lot. He had nice con to wield heavier stuff. So Bryce filled a really good niche. I think it's an early game Arbor Knight done right. I think a lot of people are always concerned, like, how do you make Armor Knights good? And part of it is just make the enemies tough enough to make their defense a worthwhile trade-off for the low speed. In a game where the enemies are weak or don't hit really well, of course you're going to, speed's going to be preferable because almost anyone can dodge. In this game, you didn't really have that luxury, and early on especially, the extra defense from Bryce to take some punishment on enemy phase, and even on player phase to start whittling down some enemies was super helpful. So I think he's a pretty well-designed unit. If maybe a little bit too strong, but considering that he's kind of also like filling in like the Jagan role, if you want to call it that, I think that he does it fine. I know I said before, like, I'm not crazy about units that are unpromoted with 2 weapon types, but I think given kind of his like pseudo like promoted more senior role on the team, for lack of a better phrase, like, it's fine. So I think he was perfectly usable. I mean, even with just an iron sword with all of that strength, he was really tearing it up. But I'm sure he'll fall off eventually, like once enemies get faster, if his speed doesn't pick up. So I'm curious to see like how long I'll be able to stretch him out for. But given kind of how the enemies hit, that defense stat's going to be really useful for a while. Then we have Mary. Mary was probably the best offensive unit I had. She grew really well. I mean, you can just look at her stats. She's level 12 and has that stat line on the top end. Really strong. Desperation's a fun skill. I only used it once on that last boss in 1F, which was really nice. Didn't really need it to, but it's nice to know that you have a unit like this that can have 2 attacks on player phase if you keep them at low health. Can probably do some pretty interesting strats with her where you get her down low and then just have her double attack quickly. I don't know how much that'll matter, but she snowballed pretty quickly. Once she was able to start doubling and gained a lot of magic, she was incredibly useful at one-rounding things. Most consistent unit I had to do that. I don't really think you need to weaken Mary. I think I've just gotten lucky both times with her. So yeah, really good unit, fun to use, powerful, fast, pretty frail, but not totally like, she didn't die in one hit, thankfully, to anything, but early on she definitely, got killed a few times, so I won't deny that. But really strong unit. Curious to see how she does moving forward. But probably the best unit I had. I would say her and Bryce really carried the bulk of the heavy lifting in this run. Clara, she's a healer. I don't really have too much else to say. I'll say it again, Live to Serve is really, really good. Lets you do some pretty interesting strats where you let Clara take hits and then heal herself up by killing someone else. It's really nifty. She has good magic, good speed. I think she'll be a fine combat unit when she promotes. I feel like she's only level 5 here. I feel like she's a little under-leveled compared to the rest of my team, but she's a healer. That's fine. I think I'll probably continue to use her. Like, if I had to pick her over Luca, I would definitely pick Clara. I think she's just more versatile, even with less movement. The heal strats alone, I think, just make for some pretty interesting gameplay choices. So I liked Clara. I think she's a fine healer, a little strong on the magic and speed side. Yeah, pretty solid overall. Curious to see where she goes. Didn't really use Rescue or Warp too much. Actually, not at all. I was pretty conservative, but I didn't really feel like I needed to that often. There was that one time I rescued to get people over. I'm sure I could have done some creative stuff, but I feel like 5 uses is low enough where it's like too good to use. So you may want to consider upping that, or I don't know. I mean, I'm sure in the context of a longer game there will be more of these staves, and I should be using them more liberally, but I didn't really feel like I absolutely needed to in any of these cases. So something to consider as well. Victoria leveled really well. Pretty classic Myrmidon. Like, look at the stat line. Like, she gained a little bit of strength, skill, speed, luck. Like, really good offensive unit. Once she was able to double, she really carved out her own niche as the best sword fighter, or rather the most speedy sword fighter on my team who could double, do nice damage. She's definitely made to be used with the killing edge, given the low con and the crit being, you know, a little bit higher thanks to her skill and luck scores. A little frail. You know, you have to be careful with her, but I think that's good balance. She is definitely a unit that you want to use to take something out and then peel her back, or put her only in situations where she could either dodge or get weapon triangle advantage, so probably dodge again. So pretty interesting unit overall. Nothing too out of the ordinary. I mean, we've all used Myrmidons before. I think that she's perfectly solid. I think story-wise, I think she's really interesting. I'm really curious, like, how she will continue to support Landon, given, you know, what we know about Landon's past and her brother's fate. So really curious to see where that all goes. But overall, Victoria was fine. She was really useful. Definitely got better as time went on, for sure. Definitely someone who will continue using. Pate was really good. I think he provides a nice foil to Victoria. He's a little bit stronger, a little bit slower. He didn't level up super well this time. You know, I think he only got like 2 points per level up. And he only leveled up like 2 or 3 times. But he did a nice job in his joint chapter, kind of taking off over the right side with the axe fighters. He did a nice job in the final, kind of peeling out some enemies towards the end and taking out one of the bosses. So really have no issues with Pate. I think he's a good foil to Victoria. I think he's a nice, like, more balanced sword user. He's kind of like Landon with swords in some ways, just like pretty balanced. Gonna put him in a couple different situations. Very flexible unit. So Gamble, I just think, is a waste, dude. Like, I get that it's his personality based on that one conversation where he talks about money a bunch of times, but Gamble is just not really that useful. I just don't really think it suits him. I feel like he'd be better served with, like, some type of different skill. I don't know what would be most appropriate, kind of given how you want to balance skills out. But Gamble, I don't know. I'm not crazy about it. I feel like it's just kind of a goof more than anything else, and I think he might stand out a little bit more if he had something a bit different. Maybe something that either helped other units or helped himself. Maybe a little bit on, like, the defensive side to give him a little bit more of a niche over Victoria. Because I mean, look at, like, she's only a point weaker, and he's way slower. Like, 6 points less speed for 1 more strength is not really a great trade-off. Yeah, he has more con, and so he can wield heavier swords, but Victoria's way faster, and I think Victoria will be better. I mean, he'll get hand axes when he promotes, most likely, but even still, like, something to consider there, like, something else to make him stand out a little more, because, like, what she gets with Vantage is so much more useful than Gamble. So something to consider there, just to make him a little bit stronger and stand out a bit more. Again, I might have gotten a good Victoria and just poor luck with him, but something to think about. Alyssa was good. I think I underused her a little bit. I think you're definitely meant to promote her instantly as soon as you get the whip from that village. I like that instead of just giving you a level 1 pre-promote, you get to choose. I think that helps create a little bit more replayability in the game, and also just give the player a little bit more to think about in terms of what they want. And I think, you know, I'm not, like, super hardcore about this type of stuff. I'll be able to beat the game with units that I like using. I figured Falco Knight would be a little bit better, more flexible than the Wyvern Knight, even if it is better statistically. But overall, like, Alyssa was really solid. She did great work in the last chapter. Having a flyer with that much move this early on is really useful. There's a lot that she can do that other units can't. So even if she is, you know, kind of low on the growth end, I think her bases will be more than enough to carry her for a while longer. I mean, she's the fastest unit in my army, and still pretty strong and good against mages. She covers a lot of different niches. She has nice HP, so I think she'll be useful for a while. Savior's a really nice skill for her. Yeah, so pretty nice way to make a flyer useful and proficient in combat, but not overbearing. Luca, not really too much to say about Luca. I didn't really use her too much. She was useful as a second staffer, but I definitely prefer Clara. Renewal is really nice though in situations like where I don't want to use Torch, or I want to just like use her reposition or something instead, and you can still get a little bit of healing back. And given the values of HP in this game, where it's all pretty low, a few extra points make or break. It can make or break you, so I think that's pretty nifty. Definitely a nice counterpart to Clara. I know some people are just like Troubadours are better because they have more move, which is fair. I mean, they only have 6 move in this hack, so not as big of an advantage as in others, but I think still useful. But I definitely preferred Clara. Ferris. So Ferris, you get him pretty late. He's in 2 chapters. He didn't level up super well for me. I really like his palette. Really like his palette. Probably my favorite palette in the hack. Maybe Alyssa would be like number 2. Just that Wyvern Knight palette is so sweet. But Ferris was fine. He definitely is a bit of a bruiser. He can dish out damage, but gets hit really hard as well. He doesn't have a ton of hit points. His defenses are pretty okay, but he's not spectacular. I feel like with a couple more levels, he'll start to really pick up a little bit. And, when you get some more axes and you can get 1-2 range more reliably, he'll be a bit stronger. I like that he has Wrath. I didn't really get to use that at all. But yeah, he was fine. I don't really know what else you can do to make him better. I think he's balanced. I don't think he's supposed to be spectacular. I mean, I certainly liked him more than the other Cavalier you got. I think he's definitely different than Eliash in terms of how he plays because of, his mount and stuff like that and what he can do outside of combat. But pretty useful unit. I think you did a nice job of just balancing the Cavaliers overall to not make them super, super strong, but also give them a bit of utility with reposition. Gerald, he's pretty underwhelming, honestly. I felt like his chip damage was nice, but I saw like his damage output. He was barely doing more than like 7-8 damage per hit on most of the enemies. He did great against the flyers, which is nice, but there weren't really too many flyers in this hack, like to give him a huge edge, and like Mary can deal with the flyers really well too, since it's mostly Wyvern Knights at this point in the game. He was the first unit I wanted to bench, so he was okay. I think he did get that 1 strength leveled up, which was nice, and his stats look good on paper, but he's just pretty underwhelming overall, and I don't really know how to solve that. There's just other units I rather would use, so he was definitely one that I was like, all right, this guy is gonna hit the bench sooner than later. Renning still feels a little weak overall. I think just having, when you think about lances, you don't really get too many different lances. You get Iron Lance, Steel Lance, and a Javelin in this part of the game. You have Bryce, who's really strong. You have Landon, who's forced. You get Alyssa, who's really strong and can fly. Renning kind of feels overshadowed by all of them in the lance using department. Yeah, he's mounted, but you get Ferris pretty soon after him, and Ferris is a little bit better. Like, he did some work, but he was mostly doing like cleanup and like off tanking, I guess. So I don't know, his stats were not super overwhelming. He seems, again, pretty balanced, but nothing to write home about. I was struggling to find a good reason to use him, because there are other units that can do the utility stuff better than him, that also can do, or rather the same utility, but also have better combat and fill more of a niche. Like, Alyssa's obviously much better. She can fly and has reposition. Ferris is only number 2 axe user versus number 3 lance user, versus number 4 lance user actually for Renning. So Ferris already feels a little bit more of a niche there. Maybe over time, Renning will turn out to be a little bit better, but its growths aren't spectacular. And you just look at them again, like, they look nice, but nothing really stands out as like, wow, this guy's going to be really good if I level him up. He just feels more like filler, ultimately. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Renning. Not the greatest. Definitely someone who I'll probably field again if I get more slots, because he has utility and can still do some stuff, but definitely not a unit I feel like I need to invest in. Ezekiel. I really wanted to use Ezekiel because he just hits really hard and he has pretty nice stats, but Mary is just so much better on the magic front, and he's slow enough that I worry about leaving him out in the front line. Like, he's pretty decent, I guess, overall. Maybe I would try him again in the final chapter next time. after giving him some kills in that first chapter. Like, he's useful. I'll probably deploy him if I get more slots. I think of the units I benched, I would probably be most inclined to bring Ezekiel because he seems to be the most flexible. And Dark Magic is, a pretty nice niche, so that's about it. That's it on the units. I'll talk a little bit more about the maps. So overall, I think the map design was pretty solid in this game overall. I mean, early game Fire Emblem, it's tough to do too many crazy things. I think what I'll say about the maps is they felt pretty tight. I feel like you didn't really waste a lot of space. Every single area had purpose, I think, for the most part. But I'll start with the maps that I didn't like so much. I would say 1-3, the map with Tremond, was probably the weakest. There was just a lack of flow. There was a lot of backtracking. There were all these different interesting paths set up, but no real reason to go down them. And sometimes I think it's because, you don't have a thief, so there's really nothing to steal. There weren't a ton of droppables that you needed to go after. I also felt like there were situations where I needed Bryce in every spot, like to deal with the Killing Edge, Myrmidon, to deal with the reinforcements, to deal with the boss. I just felt like I spent a lot of time ferrying Bryce around while everyone else kind of sat around and cleaned up. So probably the weakest map overall from a flow perspective. I think aesthetically it looks nice. I like the story. I think that it's a pretty, cool chapter where he has the Count betrays him and stuff like that, and you see this sort of tragic villain. But I would say it definitely stuck out to me as like the worst map of the bunch. And that's not to say it was bad. I'm just saying that it needs some work to improve the overall flow. And again, the thing with Renning where he's really easy to miss if you're not looking for him. So I might make it a little bit more clear that Renning's here, even if it's just like a quick dialogue with him kind of muttering to himself about like being conflicted about fighting, just to make it a little bit more obvious that he's there and that he's recruitable. Secondly, I think 1-4, the defense map, it needs more incentives to progress. Like, it's hard enough to progress already, so you don't really get that far into the map. You really only use like that top, 15% of the map, really, kind of given how fast the enemies pressure you. But there's really no incentive to not just like kind of turtle it out in that top corner. There's really no droppables. It's easy enough to go get that village with Alyssa in a couple turns and then have her come back for the end of the map. But definitely felt like I needed an incentive to go after some type of reward. I mean, you're not going to be able to kill the boss, that much is certain. Maybe you'd be able to if you used Alyssa a little bit more and kind of ignored the right side. I don't know. I could try it again and see if I can get to the boss in time, but I don't think that's going to happen. But I feel like you just need more incentives to push forward. So yeah, the story part where Grundoff comes in and kills him is pretty cool, though. I like that. I think that's a good component. And then, let's see. The others, I would say those are the two that probably need the most work of the maps. I think the first map is a fine intro chapter. I think it's nice and simple. You can still die if you're not careful like me. The final I really like conceptually. I think there's just too much baiting and not enough pressure put on the player. I mean, without a torch staff, I'm sure it would be a lot harder to be that confident in moving forward. Like, it looks kind of sparse when you get the torch staff, but even that, assuming that the player has it, it's a little too easy. Like, part of what makes Fog fun is that enemies come from all sides, and having reinforcements to kind of oscillate the amount of pressure in different areas of the map, I think could make the map feel a little bit more challenging overall. But again, like, from a story perspective, does it make sense for reinforcements to come in here? I don't know, but just something to share there. I really like it, though. I really like the map. I like the fog. I would say the top three for me would probably be 1-5, 1-1, and 1-2. I think just like running away in the escape chapter is really fun. You have to really move quickly. Not a lot of room for error. 1-2 I think was pretty good as well, even for a round. Bazap is just a really threatening boss. Bosses that move, just definitely force you to think a little bit differently. And I think the layout of the map was pretty fun to use as well. And then 1-5, just kind of going through again like the field with multiple paths, rushing to that village, doing some movement stuff. Definitely felt like the most fun experiences for me, but I also tend to gravitate towards maps that require fast movement to get stuff done. So those are my thoughts on the maps. I mean, aesthetically they're great. I think that they're pretty well put together overall, but I think you need to do some work with some of the stuff with the way the enemies flow and enemy placement, especially in 1.3 and 1.4, and a little bit more on the incentive front to keep me from turtling. Like the maps where you do anti-turtle incentives, I think they're done really well, but the other ones where you don't, I think it's a little sluggish for my liking. So definitely something to think about, but overall quite strong. Presentation, super clean. I can tell you put a lot of effort into making all of this look really nice with the conversations, the way everything flows, the mugs. They're simple, they're nice, they're pleasant to look at. Even like the simpler like recolors are perfectly fine as well, like Grundoff. I can tell you put a lot of work into the mugs and getting some artists on that. I think you said Laurent Lacroix did Landon and Eliash and a few of the others I've seen around before, or stuff that I presume you made, Bloop. So pretty nice there. And then the story. The story feels tight. It's well edited. I can tell that you really didn't waste a lot of dialogue. There really doesn't feel like... It feels like everything that gets said adds something to the characters or their development or to the plot. There's very little fluff. None of the scenes felt like they dragged out for too long. It just feels like really tight writing, and I can tell that you put a lot of work into editing it, or at least it feels that way. I like that there's a lot of tension. There's dramatic irony with the audience, which I think just kind of pulls the player in. Like the player knows like there's this conflict that's just waiting to blow up between Landon and Victoria about Ardane's death. And then there's also the conflict between Eliash and Landon insofar as like the relationship is a bit of a taboo as bastard brothers. So pretty interesting stuff there. The way the war is unfolding, the way Grundoff has approached Landon, it's like you kind of get a sense he knows something but is not super explicit. I think you do a nice job of like establishing the two nations and establishing how they're different pretty subtly. Like I definitely have a strong sense of like what Gera's like, what Ilden is like, and so I think you do a nice job of weaving that in without making it like this huge, like, you know, 1,000 years ago there was the Scouring and all this shit happened. Like you do it pretty naturally. I think Revale and Farna and the Citadel are not as well developed yet. Like I still am getting them a little mixed up overall, but I'm curious to see how that'll unfold. I'm sure in part 2 they'll get a little bit more exposition, so I'm not super worried. But yeah, and then I guess lastly, just like Landon's development. I think he develops pretty well as a character. You know, starting off kind of like nervous, wanting to do the right thing, not very confident, and then that scene with his father where his dad's like, "Yo, dude, like, you're just gonna have to make decisions and stick with them. They're not fun. Being a leader isn't all fun and games." I think that's a really important turning point in conversation for him. And yeah, I think there's just like some interesting stuff going on. So I won't drone on much longer. This has been really fun. Thanks for making this, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it develops. Happy to share more feedback. Hope this was helpful to you, Bloopy, and also to the folks who are watching. I hope this was an enjoyable LP. I hope that my voice wasn't too grating on your ears, and that the quality didn't suck too bad, but I'm going to take some notes on how I did this time, see how I can improve the quality overall, maybe do some fancier editing in future videos, because I definitely like doing this, and I think I want to play more hacks this way. So if you have any recommendations on what else I could be playing, any other hacks, finished or unfinished, I could do in this type of format, let me know. I'm definitely open to suggestions. You can find me here or on the Fire Emblem Universe Discord. I am Pandan. I also have a Discord for my own hack, Vision Quest, which you can check out as well. But thanks so much, guys, for taking the time to watch and listen to me ramble on about this game. I really enjoyed it. I definitely suggest you check it out. It's a pretty nice challenge. I would say overall nothing unbearable to start, but it's early game. You know, it's not supposed to be like brutal. So I enjoyed it a lot, and I hope you do too. So thanks again for watching, guys. This is Pandan, and I hope that you have a great day. Stay safe, and I'll talk to you soon.